It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. Take Command Podcast. Craig Hoffman here. Logan Paulsen there for this week. And then Logan is going to be going on a much-deserved vacation. Good for you. Refresh, recharge before plugging back in big time because the NFL draft is right around the corner. So I'll go ahead and tell you, next week, in that box right there, if you're watching, or the other voice you'll hear on the show if you're listening, because then you don't really care about the boxes we're in on the screen, John Kine is going to join me for a very special mailbag. So look, hey, if we can't have Logan, I know it's a big loss for the show. We're going to bring in as many heavy hitters as we can. We're working on a couple other things as well. So Kime is going to join us for the mailbag episode next week. So get your questions ready. Obviously, mailbag episode today. Coming up later in the week, we already told you last week, Dane Brugler is going to join us as The Beast comes out on Wednesday. Dane's going to join us on Thursday. And then Logan has also been working on his big board. And so we will go inside that process with Logan before we ship him off on vacation later in the week. As for today's show, Logan, mailbag, excited for it. But we're going to actually start with a question from Craig in D.C. because one of your former teammates retired, and I want to ask you about him. Julio Jones retired last week, one of the great top 10 probably players of the last decade. Just an incredible athlete. My favorite Julio story is the combine one where he goes out and runs a 4.3 on a broken foot. Just stupid. But you played with him in Atlanta. So I want, before we dive into the rest of the Commanders and draft questions, your favorite Julio Jones story.
Yeah, so my favorite story is going to be kind of boring because obviously Julio's a great dude, but it's all the stuff. It's kind of like Trent, to me, they're in a very similar bucket in terms of like playing with them because they both did stuff that was just like absolutely freaky. Like everyone's heard about the Trent Williams story, like walking into the gym with the flip-flops on and doing like a windmill dunk at like 3:35, right? Or like him, running down on I remember like, this is a Trent story, but we're going to get to Julio in a second, but like working a backside cutoff and me running to the safety and then some like bus just running by me, at 22 miles an hour and blocking the safety. And I was like, well, I guess I'll block this guy over here now. You know what I'm saying? So like, a lot of them are related to that kind of stuff. Julio was a great teammate, mentored the young guys, was very approachable and accessible, great dude. But the stuff that I really remember about him was we had a inter squad scrimmage, kind of instead of a joint practice during training camp. And so he was playing on the other team and the other team was the quarterback was Matt Schaub. So the backup quarterback. And I just remember standing on the sideline and he ran a comeback right in front of me. And I could feel the ground shake. I'm not exaggerating. He was so violent and strong with his feet, throwing his feet down to stop and coming out of this comeback that I was just in awe. That's when you tell a kid, when you're running routes or when you're getting coached up, violently throw your feet down, really be aggressive. And to me, that was just a totally different caliber of athlete and deceleration. And again, I was talking to Austin Hooper about it afterwards. And I was just I've never seen anything like that. It's everyone wonders why his feet are always broken. It's his bones can't handle how strong his tendons are when he decelerates. Because, as when you're decelerating, you're at almost 5 times body weight on those steps. And they're a long ground contact time. So that was incredible. And then you'd go in the weight room and he's a big guy, he's 6'3", he's 220, but he'd be back squatting, chain squatting 650, it's to a high box, no doubt. But he was just
most people can't get 650 off the rack.
Correct. And he was doing it for reps, and he was just one of the freakiest human beings. And just watching him run, watching him jump, it was just a different, in the NFL, everyone's a freak, everyone's freaky. I look back on my time now, it's funny, being removed from it and seeing the guys that don't make it or didn't have a shot. And you just realize how special that group is. And he was the 1.01% of that group. All the freaks that I knew, all the freaky guys that I played with were that dude is an absolute maniac. And so seeing that level of athleticism and then, so obviously crazy athlete, but also seeing the level of professionalism, the way he took care of his body, the way he studied, the way he understood the game. He'd be in the meeting and he'd turn around to the young receivers and be like, hey guys, make sure you pay attention to this cover 2 look. If this happens, right, I want to the route should look like this. And just, that was that was who he was. And so, like, not only was it great physical performance, but the mental side was there too. And like when I think about guys that are borderline Hall of Fame players that I played with, like London Fletcher comes to mind. Like there's this physical excellence that's there, but there's also this awesome professionalism, and Julio just embodied that to a T. So
yeah, Julio's surefire Hall of Famer. London should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense why he's not. One of the most prolific linebackers in the history of the game, a champion, the whole deal, and yet he's somehow on the outside looking in still. But Julio will get in probably. I mean, he might be a first ballot guy. He was that
like
good.
That.
If not, he'll be second, third year. He'll definitely get in. Yeah, I mean, you play with some great dudes. By the way, the other former teammate of yours that was in the news last week, JJ Watt's going to be calling games on CBS now, so that'll be interesting.
I think he'll be good at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. He and Ian Eagle were great last year on Netflix, and apparently that was enough for JJ that he was like, no, this is fun. Get me out of the studio. I want to do this. And so he's going to be in the number 2 booth with Ian this year, Charles Davis, figuring out what they're doing with our pal Charles for this year. And then he's going to take over the lead college football job next year with Gary Danielson retiring. So there's your broadcast news of the week involving our friends and former teammates. Also,
I got another Julio story real quick, because it is, he did retire. The other thing about Julio that I always appreciated is the year that I played with him, he didn't score a touchdown until week like 10.
I remember that year,
He never said one negative thing about it. And the other cool thing is he caught like a little slammer screen. It was against Washington. So like, offensive line gets out. Jake Matthews gets out in front and has a great block, and Julio takes it to the house. And you would never see a group of guys more stoked for their star player to score a touchdown. Like the entire team, the defense came out on the field, the offense came out on the field. And I think you can find the clip, and it just speaks to who he was to that organization, that team. And, I loved Julio, playing with him. Like, again, I don't know if he knows, if he remembers I was on the team, but like, it was cool to see. It's cool to see excellence up close and personal. And just to be a part of that for a little bit was awesome. So yeah, great dude, great teammate. Everyone loved him, and, should be in the Hall of Fame, just like London, like you said. So
congrats, Julio, on an outstanding career. And Logan, that actually unpredictably leads us into our first mailbag question from Wahoo Dad. Asks a non-draft wide receiver question, although this is kind of a draft adjacent question. What makes route running so difficult? Obviously, when we're evaluating receivers for the draft, it's something that we look at, and we talk about even the best of the best guys in the league. Sometimes it can be a skill that the best receivers can always get better at. So what makes route running at the NFL level so difficult, considering you did it?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I coach it now, and I think coaching it reveals a lot of the challenges with it. And you need kind of a special type of athlete to get it done. So, we could make it a draft related question too. So I was doing a segment for Ticket to the Draft podcast, which is our draft show for the Commanders. And one of the things that they were like, we need guaranteed ballers. So the guys that 100% surefire are going to be good football players. And so I was going through like the Tetro McMillans, the Matthew Goldens, Tetro McMillan, obviously the receiver from Arizona, Matthew Golden, receiver from Texas, Emeka Mbuka, receiver from Ohio State, and just kind of going through their film and just kind of, do they have that it factor when it comes to running routes? And so first off, like we can start with Tetro McMillan. Like he's a big dude. He runs well for his size. And I think the thing that makes him different, and this is the thing that makes route running so hard, is the stop and the start, right? You can watch 1,000 people run a comeback, right? Like it's drawn on paper, like nice straight line, come back on that angle. And that 3 to 4 yards at the top of the route is the thing that makes you excellent at it, right? Like I think about Pierre Garçon is a really good example, like really strong, thick lower half. He could do that comeback in like 5 steps. So like 4 steps. So two deceleration steps, a gather, and then a directional step. And you could get out of it really quickly, and it worked really well. So there's that element to it, right? And so when you look at the receivers in this class, like Matthew Golden probably does that the best, but you don't feel his vertical speed. You don't feel his vertical juice. So then you say, okay, like you got to stop and start. The other thing is you got to accelerate, and they got to feel your athleticism into the defense, right? So that's where a guy like Tetro McMillan, you feel him, right? But sometimes the stops are a little bit messy. Matthew Golden, the stop starts are excellent, and it gets but the vertical speed, even though he ran a 4.3, you don't feel it into the defense. So you say, okay, that's part of it. And then there's the stuff that happens between the start and the stop at the top of the route, right? Where you are talking about stems and angles, because DBs, have different rules that kind of set up coverages, right? So like, for example, the easiest one to coach is like one plug. So like it's man coverage, everyone's outside leverage. They're trying to force you to the middle of the field because the plug player is right there with the middle high safety. If I've got an outbreaking route, like I can't just run out, right? Because the DB is just going to relate to me. My route's going to get flat, and the window I'm trying to work is going to get crushed. So I have to understand now that I have to burst inside, push vertical, get that defender in a trail position. And once he's in a trail position, now I can work a double stick. Now I can work something at the top of the route to throw him and then break his leverage to the perimeter. So there's the physical component, the acceleration, the deceleration. Then there's the stuff that happens in between. And so honestly, when I was going through my list of pass catchers yesterday, the guy that did that the best was Colston Loveland from Michigan. And so that's the guy that I'm going to pick for this list, because he does the stopping and the starting, the acceleration, but also the Zach Ertz. We talked about this before, like the dark arts of understanding the defense and then breaking those rules with how I set up my route. So that's where I'd say that's why it's so challenging, because there's a mental component, but there's also a really, really important physical component to it.
Yeah, before you even get to any of the mental stuff and the ability to correctly read coverage while you're running full speed, you have the timing, tempo, and precision. I was trying to think of like how do I get this down as you're talking about it, and those are the three words I landed on: timing, tempo, and precision. Because you have to be going fast enough to make the defense feel you, but you can't just then say, I'm going to run full. And we're talking about even on just like a comeback, right? Nevertheless, any of the more nuanced routes where you're talking about what angle do I break at and all those kinds of things. Do I get the right depth on my route? Like if we're just talking about a pure comeback, you need to run fast enough that you can get that DB hopefully to turn and open because they feel that vertical speed. Yeah. But you have to be under control enough that you don't take 17 steps to stop your body, come back downhill, get the other way, and stay on balance. So you have to have the timing, the tempo, and the precision. But again, if you go too slow so that you're under control, you're not going to get enough depth on the route before the quarterback needs to throw it, because everything is timed, at least in most NFL offenses, is timed with the quarterback's drop. And so because you have all of those things moving together, then you have the reality that you have to be able to read a defense, on the fly. If you're a tight end or you're a slot receiver and you're running a go ball, where that go ball is going to hit versus cover 2, where you're going to try to maybe split the safeties, versus a cover 3 where you're going to try to keep it at the seam, or whatever the rules are in a particular route combination, how the routes interchange with each other. Right? Like certain route combos, not only is your route adjustable, but the route underneath you or above you might be adjustable. And if you guys get in each other's space, now you're bringing your defender in. So there's a solo element to route running, but also a team element to route running. There's, quarterbacks sometimes want certain stuff done a certain way. And all of a sudden your backup is in. Do you remember how he wants the slant run versus the starter? Like there's just it's so nuanced. And I think that's the thing. And by the way, it's nuanced within this, system. I'm trying to think of a better word. Nuanced within, because I'm not talking about like offensive system. It's nuanced within this universe of 22 moving pieces. Like you're one of 22 on the field. Like you might want to run this comeback or this in route at a certain depth, but all of a sudden you see the middle linebacker in the middle of the field, and you're like, well, I got to run around that guy, or I got to make sure I figure out how to navigate that. And that's, I know, something that's coached of like, okay, against this coverage, whatever. And that's also, you get your man versus zone. Do I keep running or do I stop? Like there's just so much to it. And I think the fact that it's taken us 7 minutes to explain probably answers what makes route running so difficult in some kind of self-evident way.
Yeah, and I think people hear that and say, people can't be thinking about that all the time. And some people just do it intuitively, but the best route runners that I've been with, they understand those principles really, really well. They might not be able to articulate them to you, but when you watch the film, it pops out. And I think that's the thing is there's some people that just have a natural aptitude for it. And I think a lot of the people that are really successful, we're talking about Julio, for example, he just has a feel, for being violent on his decelerations. I was talking about Colston Loveland, just being friendly to the football, taking away defenses angles. There's you can coach that, I coach high school football. You can talk through that, but there's certain guys that just are I
Jordan Reed.
Yeah,
when he was here. Like Jordan was so great because he had that, and like the basketball background was not just the footwork of the crossover step, and that was nasty, and he juke people out all the time, but he also knew how to set it up. And so when you talked about like, oh, this guy's got inside leverage, and I need to break out, Jordan could make that happen. He could break leverage because he knew how to get the guy to turn and set him up. And I think that's, from being a ball handler in basketball on top of just the football experience that he had.
And I know we can talk about Jordan Reed all day because he was such a great route runner, but like he's a guy that was like compulsive about it. Like he had a natural affinity for it. And I think I've told this story before. Like he sat behind me in the meeting and I could hear his feet in the meeting running routes, based on coverage looks that he was getting. Like he would work the timing of it. So again, like it's this weird kind of mix of people having a natural feel. He did the best natural feel, but it was also like he loved running routes, so he put a lot of time in on it and got really good at it. And again, the best route runners that I played with were guys that were naturally gifted at it, and then they kind of just they wanted to be better at it. They understood how important it was. And again, like if you were to talk to Santana, I think he's a good example about running routes. It wouldn't be all this, right?
No,
definitely not. But he would have elements of this conversation in there.
For sure.
I think that's the thing that pops out. It's like,
and he would do all of them.
Yes.
He just doesn't necessarily, like, it was so natural to him that he wouldn't necessarily articulate it.
Yeah. And so like for those of you like are like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Like it is a lot. And if you want to be good at it, it is a lot to be good at it. And that's why like those guys, like, one of the reasons why, like, the thing I remember most about Julio Jones is obviously great teammate, but it's how he ran his routes. Like, that's what it was so different because he was so good at it. Like, that's where it's like, I remember Santana, I remember Jordan Reed, great teammates, great guys, but they just did that route running stuff so well. That's one of the things that makes Zach so special now and made Zach special his whole career. So there is a beauty to it and an art to it that doesn't always show up.
For sure. And there's a precision to it, which foot hits where. I remember working, and this is kind of a dual story to wrap us up here, working out with Lorenzo Alexander and Randall Cobb a couple years ago with Chris.
Oh, yeah.
And, we were giving Lorenzo looks as he was making that transition to outside linebacker. And my silly self was there trying to play receiver. And like Randall or Chris, who played wide receiver in college, and Randall would be like, hey, do it this way. That's going to be the better look for Lorenzo. And so I'm learning like some of the nuances of route running on the fly, and like the difference it made was crazy. Of like this little step here, stem here, make sure that you hit with this foot and then get out of your break here. And then the talking to Randall a little bit more after the workout, he was talking about the timing element of it, where as a former quarterback, as he was when he got to Kentucky, he understood that, this is back when he's in Green Bay with Rodgers, that like, sometimes he's the first read and sometimes he's the third, right. And he better be open at the right time because the NFL open happens in such a short window. And so if you are open too early and you win too quickly and you're the third guy, well, by the time that Rodgers gets to you in the progression, you're not open anymore. And so that's another element too of the timing and understanding of the scheme writ large on that play, to know I got to flash now. This is my time, and to time that up really well. And if you have chemistry with the quarterback over a number of years, like those two had, and like so many of the, Julio and Matt had, then that can happen at a really high level. Take Command Podcast, Mailbag Edition. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here, and Tyler writes in, says, I love the podcast. I wanted to ask your opinion on two draftable players the Commanders could take. The first is wide receiver Trey Harris, who's a big receiver with downfield ability who dominated for Ole Miss when healthy. The other is Ahmed Hassenien, the defensive end from Boise State, 6'2", 272 with good pass rush ability. He came to the U.S. from Egypt, so he was late to playing football. I think he could be a good day 3 addition to the defense. Looking forward to hearing your opinion. Thanks. We're just talking receivers, Logan. So let's start with Trey Harris. And then I'm very intrigued to hear your thoughts on Hassenien, especially considering we know, for instance, last year with Brandon Coleman, a guy that was late to football. We know that Adam Peters sometimes looks at that ceiling upside of a guy who has plenty of more room to grow because he's not quite as experienced. But what's the book on Trey Harris first as we look at some potential receiver options for the Commanders?
Yeah, Trey Harris is probably the more interesting of the two for me personally, again, because he's a big body guy. He's like 6'3", he's like 210, 215, and he plays in this Ole Miss offense, helmed by who's the offensive coordinator there?
Lane Kiffin.
Lane Kiffin, that's right. And he and there's just a lot of space. He runs a lot of hitches, runs a lot of posts. Think about like your DK Metcalf route tree from when he was coming out, where it's like, I'm going to run a go, I'm going to run a post, I'm going to run a hitch. And so there is a lot of like, I'm bigger and more physical than you, and I'm going to win this ball down the field. And I do have some vertical horsepower to run and kind of get open and do some things down like that. The thing that I come back to, I love big receivers. I absolutely love them. But like, just because we just talked about Julio, we just talked about route running, there is a little bit of nuance that you need to see from that position. And if you can't start and stop, if you can't get out of your cuts, like you can't just out big everybody all the time, you know? And I think that's where with him, where I'm a little bit on the fence, because again, like it's not his fault. It's just the offense they were in. Like, I went through every one of his targets and everyone. And so you do occasionally see him run a really nice dig, which to me is like one of those routes that kind of shows a little bit of nuance. I got to decelerate, I got to work a stem, and it looks good, right? And he can catch the football well. He's not a super natural catcher of the football. Like there's certain guys where it's just like there's like Tetra McMillan's a good example. There's just like Velcro in their hands, like they can just catch it. I'm not saying Trey Harris is bad at that. Just saying that's not like his superpower. So the thing that gets me is like, do you have enough size and physicality to make that play at the next level? Like, so another example is like Tyler Warren from Penn State. Like his college film is tremendous, right? But he outbigs a lot of people. Like he's just bigger, like and stronger than a lot of people. In the NFL, everyone's big and strong. Does that still play? And that's kind of the same question I have with Trey Harris, right? Is can you be bigger and stronger at the NFL level when you're big and strong in college, but it's not like dominantly big and strong? And so that's where it's like, is he an impressive athlete? Yes. Would he be interesting at like 61? Probably for the Commanders. But I do have questions about his game. And again, like if I'm picking you in the second round, there's questions about everyone's game, like Jaden Higgins, right? Can you truly play outside receiver? You played mostly slot in college, right? Jalen Noel from Iowa State. Like, can you be more consistent? Can you play bigger than your frame? Like there's all these questions with everybody, but those are my questions with Trey Harris. I would be interested if the Commanders made that selection at 61 because he's big and he's fast. It's just, is that nuance, is that kind of top shelf physicality there for him? And the question is, I don't know, but interesting at 61 probably.
Yeah, he's big and he's fast, but he's not huge or blazing. He ran 4.54 at the combine. He's listed 6'2", 205 on NFL.com's profile. He's 6'3", 210 on PFF. So I'm guessing PFF's number is what Ole Miss gave him, and the NFL's number is what he actually measured in at. So that does feel significant. So it's not like, and look, I feel like anytime I talk about DK, people are like, but you hate DK. And I'm like, I don't. I just didn't want him here for the point is, like, he's not DK, right? DK is 6'4", even if he doesn't play like it, and he is 225, and he is 4.3 fast. That is not who Trey Harris is. So, if you're trying to big body people, but you also don't have the speed, or your body's not that much bigger than a lot of these DBs right now, who guys are like 6'1", 190, 195, then that does become, I think, a real question. All right, Ahmed Hassenien, Boise State. I got no file on him. I learned about him when this question came up. So this is all you, but I am intrigued by the story. This is a guy that I wish we were actually talking about him next week, because then the beast would be out, because Dane will have some incredible story in it. So maybe we'll ask Dane about him on Thursday. Maybe not, but what's your read on him?
Yeah, so I really enjoy watching him. He's a fun watch. He kind of plays like a 4-eye 5 technique, so like kind of right over the nose of the tackle. And he plays hard. You can tell he loves football. You can just tell he absolutely loves the game. He plays hard. He's finishing the ball almost every play. Like he just is passionate about it. The problem with him is he's 6'1", he's 267. So a little undersized to kind of play interior defensive line at the NFL level, right? Which is kind of what that 4-eye position is. Like when you think about a traditional 4-eye, you're talking like 6'4", 6'5", like 290 to 310. And like, he doesn't really fit in that mold. So to me, he's got to kick out, right? So he'd have to kick to like a true 5 technique, 6 technique. Trying to think of a good example. In our defense, it's kind of like Cleveland Farrell, like that type of guy, right? The problem is, like, he's not a plus athlete. He is kind of an athlete that fits more the mold of a traditional 4-eye. Like he's He's ran a 4.87 at the combine. His jumps were just okay. Like when you watch his field work, his bend is fine. Like he's, again, like the football player, the passion, the motivation, the physicality, it's there. And so when you say, oh, like what's his role here if he were to come to Washington? Yeah, I think he'd be a rotational guy that is kind of like Karlaftis in Kansas City. And Karlaftis is a much better athlete, but a guy that's never going to generate a ton of pressure on his own, but is going to kind of get cleanup sacks. And you need kind of you need to complement somebody who's an elite pass rusher. You know, Karlaftis complements Chris Jones, right? Like that's kind of what it would need to be here. And to me, he's not a guy that's going to kind of generate on his own because he lacks the athletic upside. But in terms of liking the film, like I really like the film. And if they signed him like in the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round to come here, like I would be excited because it's like he loves playing football. He's physical. And he'd have to kind of be a guy that, you know, is bottom half of the roster, maybe practice squad guy that has special teams value. And because of it's obvious, like at the combine, they did a feature on it. Like, you know, like when I'm watching the drills, he's getting ready to do a drill and he's just like, so juiced up. He's screaming at the D-line coach. Like he's just excited, like, let's go, you know, like, and I love that. I love that person. And so I'm going to bet on that person to make an NFL roster. I think the problem with a guy late is there are other guys that are, you could get late that have more athletic upside. And I think that's where you kind of run into a weird thing with Hassenien, you know?
Yeah. So I think that it goes back to what we talked about with Jeremy on kind of the peeling back the layers of the onion, and every layer you peel back is like a down round grade. Yeah. And it's like, okay, for him, the idea of taking someone who hasn't been playing football that long often is they're a great athlete. And it's like, God, if we could mold this guy into a football player. And for him, not having that athletic upside feels like it's definitely going to peel away multiple layers almost at once. And so I think that's the hard sell for him. But if he's got the passion and you said the work ethic and all that stuff shows up, and he's going to light up interviews and guys are just gonna be like, I want that guy in the room. That's definitely maybe a higher floor guy to bet on in theory, that he, at the very least, he's going to go out there and bust his butt on special teams and play really hard for the 7 snaps a game on defense you need him. And there are worse guys to have than a guy who has that kind of passion. And, you know, also what does he do to the rest of the room of, you know, the star player can never slack off because there's that guy fighting for his life, just trying every single snap and paying, asking good questions in meetings and all that kind of stuff.
And I was talking to Fred about this too. And it's like, ultimately what you're trying to find is people that love football. And to me, when I watch him play, when I see his kind of interviews, like, dude loves ball. So I'm going to take a bet on that guy. So like, does he move up my list? Yeah. But is he still in that range of like, you know,
we're still talking a 5th, 6th, 7th rounder for sure.
Correct. Yeah.
For sure. In terms of first rounder, next question comes from Timoth78. Hello, Timoth. Who are the sprint to the podium prospects for you at 29? We've done we've almost answered this like haphazardly, shotgun style, as we've done different mock drafts. And it's like, oh, if that guy's on the board. So let's consolidate some of our answers in one place here. Guys that theoretically could be available at 29 because they drop for one reason or another that you're like, oh, hell yeah, let's go. No thinking about it. We're not going to waste time. We're past midnight and it's time to make a draft pick. Let's get this done.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we want to start an edge rusher, like obviously Mike Green, I don't think the more I watch him, the less likely I think this is, unless the off-field stuff is just dramatic. You know what I mean? Like
that seems to be the only question. Like I feel like that is, the more you watch him and the more everyone watch him, that's the narrative on him is like, if he drops, it's going to be because 25 teams have him off the board for off-field stuff, not because of anything that's on tape or in the athletic testing.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I don't think that happens, honestly. The next one would be Donovan Ezuraku, you know, from Boston College. Like he can rush the passer. Like he can just rush the passer at a really high level. He's kind of, to me, he's got like the perfect build for it. He's like 6'2", he's like 250, he's got 34-inch arms, and his bag is so deep. You know, he's a little bit undersized versus the run, which again might throw some teams off, but I think he really comps well. And Jeremy said this, and I've heard other people say this too, to Nick Bonito, a guy that's a little undersized, but just has the juice. And like I had a coach tell me one time, is if there's any sign of juice, like with a pass rusher, you got to jump on it. And he's got it, and he just is this. And I think about what the Commanders need, and him at 29. I don't know. The more I watch him as a pass rusher, like I think I got thrown off early on because he's just okay against the run, but like as a pass rusher, he just brings this tremendous trump card to the table and tremendous nuance to the position. The other guy at edge would be like Nick Scorton. I'm a big Landon Jackson guy. The more I watch him, and again, I would die if Landon Jackson was a Commander, but he feels more like a high to mid second round pick. Nick Scorton's a guy that I think actually could be there at 29. Like he just plays so hard. He's physically
Is he
violent.
in the sprint to the podium category though?
Because of how he plays. You know what I mean? Like he just plays hard. And when you watch his 2023 tape, he's 11 sacks, and they're good sacks. Like he's got a deep bag. And so like I think you couple the physicality, the mindset, kind of the every down intensity he brings with the pass rush upside. I feel pretty good about that. So those are like the three names that to me come to mind, and as edge rushers. And then everyone's going to ask me about James Pierce Jr. Like I think James Pierce Jr., if he was a Commander, I'd be really excited because I trust the staff. But when I watch the film, like I don't think he has top shelf bend. He's got top shelf get off, and he's got top shelf like physicality. But you need someone that's going to like make him the best version of himself. And I trust the Commanders to do that. But I would definitely take those three guys right now above him. And that's not that sounds like I'm being like mean to James Pierce.
That's the reality of it.
I just
where your
prefer
board
those
is.
other three guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
and the other thing, he's got off-field stuff too, so you'd have to trust the staff on that part of it as well. Is there anybody in the pass catcher category? And I'm specifically phrasing this as pass catcher because I know one of your guys is Colston Loveland. That if somehow he gets past the Chargers in a reunion with Harbaugh at 22 and he falls all the way down, that he's a run to the podium guy for you. But who else in the pass catcher category?
Yeah, I mean, he for sure is. Like, if he was there, like, it would be hard pressed. Like him and Mike Green are there. Like, it's like Sophie's choice. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to pick? Because I think Colston Loveland, I don't know. I think he could be special. Like this year, kind of like, I went back and watched Brock Bowers just to kind of refresh my memory. Like, and from a route running standpoint, I think everyone just take a deep breath as I'm talking here. I think he's a better route runner than Brock Bowers, but Brock Bowers was a more special prospect because of what he did with the ball in his hands. Like I've never seen a tight end catch the football the way he did and then just break tackles and make people look silly. So like, just to give you some context there, like I think he's in that kind of group, obviously
really special route runner, catcher of the football, gets open, reliable,
like body control. Like he's tough. Like I was watching a game last night where he pops his shoulder out of his socket and then comes back in and tries to play the rest of the game. I just love that type of stuff. Like you love ball. I love ball. So yeah, Colston Loveland, obviously like this is like total pipe dream, but like Ashton Genty, if he's available for it's not going to happen, but that would be an interesting one. I like Tetro McMillan a lot. He's not going to fall to 29, but we're talking just, perfect world, perfect scenario. And same thing with the defensive line. If Shamar Stewart by some kind of miracle,
Jalen Walker, like we talked about with Jeremy.
Yeah. Like those guys I don't think they're going to be there, but if they are, you run them in because I think they could be difference makers. But the other one that's interesting to me, and the more I watch him, the more I kind of I'm like, oh man, this guy could be a really good pro, is Emeka Mbuka from Ohio State. Yeah. And I think there's a real chance he's there. And am I running it in? But he kind of falls in that Nick Scorton category where the more I watch him, the more I like him as a route runner, the more I like him as a blocker, the more I like him as a professional NFL wide receiver.
He just does everything well.
Correct.
And you're waiting for, he's one of the guys that I've spent a little time with. And like, at first I'm just like, this is fine. And then you realize that like, it's every snap is the same quality. No matter what you route running, it doesn't matter the route, doesn't matter. Like he catches the football reliably, he blocks, he's physical. There's nothing that pops. There's no I'm sure when you went back and watched Terry at Ohio State, there's a couple of plays. I remember some of the highlights of watching him after they drafted him, being like, let's see what this kid's all about. Right. And you're like, oh, this kid just ran 80 yards away from everybody. Like that's pretty neat. Igbuka's not going to do that. But like he'll have 8 catches for 78 yards and 6 of them will be for first downs, and he'll have a key block on somebody else and this and that. And so, he's a weird prospect, but I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, tremendously high floor, and I think that's awesome. Matthew Golden, I like a lot. He reminds me a little bit like AB. just from like a change of direction, route running, like he can kind of do everything. And again, I think he probably goes higher. You know, like when you hear about like Steve Smith, for example, did his receiver rankings recently and had him ahead of Tetra McMillan. And
that's happening more and more too. There's other people that also like that.
The thing about Matthew Golden is I don't feel the speed from him.
Yeah.
Like
also that stat Jeremy gave us scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah. So again, like he's interesting, but I'm becoming more of a Mecca Ibuka guy the more I watch him. So to answer your question, and then the other one I would just throw in this bucket of like offensive
sprint to the podium. Yeah.
Yeah. Is Amarian Hampton. Like he's not Ashton Genty, and I'm not a big take your running back in the first round, but the more I watch, he's not there yet. He's not the Colson Loveland and Mecca Ibuka. He's not in that category for me yet. But the more I watch him, the more I'm like, he could be a difference maker in an offense. So those are some names offensively that I think are interesting. Obviously, I still am really high on Josh Simmons. Like, you know, like I heard that the injury's okay. I heard his interviews were just okay. Like, but the tape, if we're just talking about the tape for me, like it's really good tape, and he could be like a franchise left tackle. So I know we have one, but if you were to play right and then Coleman play, like
if you want to Tristan Wirfs it and have Tunsil play left tackle for 3 years, and then Josh Simmons becomes an all-pro at right tackle and then flips over to the left and does that, like Wirfs, chances you're going to redo that very slim, because Wirfs is the first guy to ever be an all-pro on both sides of the line at tackle. But like the idea of going right tackle to left tackle and being good at both is not unheard of. Just real quick, any of the DBs sprint to the podium, or is it kind of like, hey, if everybody else goes and we're going to get the Will Johnson, non-Travis Hunter next best DB on the board, like we'll take them. But is there anybody, corner or safety, that you sprint?
It's actually the two safeties for me, Malachi
Starks and Starks.
Like, and I don't think either one of them is going to be there. Like, but Malachi Starks is. Jahadae Barron's probably like in contention for this title.
I should have mentioned him as the
best football player, you know, just football player. Like when I watch Malachi Starks, like he tackles well, he takes good angles, he can play man coverage. Like I heard a defensive coordinator say he's the safest pick in the draft. And the more I watch him, the more I'm just like his floor is just sky high. Like he's gonna be a good pro. And then if you're trying to swing for the fences, like Nick Amon-Worry, like I don't love his tackling all the time, but like I'll be damned if he just showed you something just magical every once in a while. And you're just like, you know, so like those two guys for me, and then obviously Jahadae Barron, but I think he's a top 15 pick, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like those are the three.
And Amon-Worry and Starks might be, but they also might be available for Washington at the end of the first round. So that's kind of the crux of the question. The Amon-Worry, I mean, the physical tools are outrageous. One of the craziest raw athletes we've ever seen. But also I've heard Dane talk about his teammates just raving about his mental side and the plays he makes and his understanding of coverage and all that kind of stuff. So that's something that I think is worth tagging for a guy that's kind of put out there as a physical freak. Like his mental game's pretty strong too.
Yeah, and I don't know if that answers the question, but I know we talked about a lot of guys, but it feels like we kind of touched on them. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I think
there's some guys we're excited about.
Question answered. One of those guys, please be available at 29. Wrapping up here on Take Command, Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. Last mailbag question, Logan. And this one is from Tim, who emailed me and said, Craig, hope you're well. My friend group, all Commanders fans, and I were talking about the possibility of the Commanders trading back in the upcoming draft. My question to you is, with the 29th overall pick, what teams do you see wanting to trade up to get that pick from the Commanders? I personally don't see any. My second question is, what type of compensation would you like with the 29th overall pick? Love the show. You and Logan have incredible chemistry. Thanks. Logan, high five. Yay. So this is a great question. And by the way, really appreciate the questions that like get to a different angle of some of the things we've been talking about. It is kind of funny, Logan. Sometimes I'll put out for questions, and then I know that people sometimes responding to those don't actually listen to the show because we answered that question already. So I love a question like this. It's like, we've talked about trading back a lot, but we do this kind of hypothetical thing of like, oh, well then who's available? And we kind of skip over the part where we need an actual trade to be available, which means you need a trade partner. And everybody would always like to trade back, so you need someone willing to trade up. So let's talk about that part of it first. And then I pulled up a couple of draft charts, and I can talk about the compensation a little bit based off of how teams do that with the charts and how the charts kind of adjust themselves year to year depending on what's happening. So first things first, who are some of the teams you look at, specifically at the top of the second round, that you think Washington would be willing to do business with if they made a call and said, hey, we want to come up? And the obvious second part of that question is, why do you think these teams might be looking to come up?
Yeah, so there's 3 teams, and I have different levels of confidence in all 3 of them. But one would be the New York Giants, the other one would be the New Orleans Saints, and the other one would be the New York Jets. And the reason I've kind of honed in, and again, like the way he worded the question, it's like, are there any teams that would trade up? I am, and I kind of tend to align with the question. I agree with his conclusion a little bit more. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people trading up, because I think when you look at the value of this draft, I think it is the second and third round. I think when you look at those players, like we had to do a thing for the show, the Ticket to the Draft show I do, where it was like certified ballers in the first round, and then, guys you think are going to be really good football players in the third round. And it was so much easier for me to find third round players that I absolutely adored and loved, and just their tape was awesome, than the first round guys. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a weird draft that way this year. But anyway, The reason I picked those 3 teams is because I do think that there is a kind of growing momentum for Jackson Dart in this draft class when you talk about the draft community. And I personally like Jackson Dart quite a bit. I don't know if he's a first round player for me, but if you're the New York Giants and you want a quarterback for the future and you're trying your day ball, you're trying to say, hey, we've got somebody that we can build around, keep us around for another year, trading into the first round for that player might not be a bad idea. I do think it's a little bit unlikely, because at 34, he's probably going to, I would assume Jackson Dart would be there at 34. But again, crazier things have happened, right? So that's kind of what
let's just talk through that scenario real quick, though, because I think this is worth double clicking on. There are 2 reasons teams trade up. One, and specifically from the top of the second round into the first, because these teams at the bottom of the first round don't need a quarterback. So it's like, why wouldn't you wait? Well, one, if another team wants to trade up, well, now you're in a bidding war and you got to get up in front of that other team. And by the way, if you're the Commanders and you have the Jets and the Giants on the horn, and you're like, hey, they're offering X. We're offering X plus 1. They're offering X plus 1. Do you want to do X plus 2? Now you can get the better deal. Yeah. And so we talk about the compensation. It helps if you got 2 partners or 2 potential trade partners that need to beat each other and be the best offer to get the guy they want, especially when that player is a quarterback. The other element of this is if a team feels really confident in a player, and they're like, that guy, and especially a quarterback, is going to be a stud. Or if it's an edge or a receiver or another position that is expensive. Corner falls into this category. Getting the 5th-year option is huge. Offensive line is another one. Let's say Josh Simmons falls.
Yeah.
And another team is, yeah.
And I just, in terms of names, Jackson Dart at 28, this is on the NFL mock draft database, right? Just people that would be kind of in that 25 range. The name that is there in neon lights for me is Derek Harmon from Oregon, the defensive tackle, because when you look at him, to me, he might be the best defensive player in the draft. And if he's going to be there at 29, that seems unlikely. I think fans, when they do this database, it's just fans haven't heard of him, so here he is at this position. He's
a defensive tackle from Oregon. He's hiding up there in the Pacific Northwest.
Right, correct. But I could see a team being like, dude, we love him, we love this guy. And again, with the way defensive tackle contract values are going, let's get that 5th-year option, get him locked in, get him in our organization for a long time. So there are some interesting names there. Again, Donovan Ezeraku, I could see a team falling in love with him, maybe bumping back into the first round. Seems unlikely with the edge, but Derek Harmon, Josh Simmons are 2 guys that I'd be like, hey, maybe this is the move. And then the third name is Jackson Dart in terms of value that it's fallen down the board kind of thing.
100%. So if you get those types of guys where the 5th-year option is going to be a huge discount for you in year 5, it's worth trading up for. And if you're a team like the Commanders, and maybe there's multiple guys you're choosing from and you're pretty confident that they'll still be available and you don't care as much about the 5th-year option for whatever reason, then it's probably worth trading back and getting the extra draft capital. If you're a team like the San Francisco 49ers and you have 10 picks and you're a team like Washington who has 5 and you want to even that out a little bit more, it might be worth it for San Francisco to get the 5th-year option and worth it for Washington to say, screw that 5th-year option. We'd rather have the extra draft capital and take the extra guy. So I think that's how that goes down. And then you get back to, your list of 3 teams and why these 3 teams make the most sense for you.
Yeah, so obviously I think I mentioned the quarterback situation with the Giants, and then New Orleans is probably the most interesting because they do have a history of trading up, trading back into the first round, doing some more aggressive things. They have 9 draft picks this year. Kellen Moore is the first-year head coach there. Maybe he wants to kind of get his guy, and if you can get him late, kind of like Baltimore did with Lamar Jackson, that seems like potentially the right kind of move. And then the New York Jets, that seems a little far for me for them to move up. But again, if you love the quarterback, and like to your point, you get that 5th-year option on the Jackson Dart quarterback. And I personally think Jackson Dart's a 2nd-round player. But, like I was talking to Jeremy Green about this actually, and he's like, I multiply all my quarterback grades by 1.2. And if you do that, then all of a sudden Jackson Dart is now kind of a fringe first-round guy. So if NFL teams do that same thing, and you like him, then the New York Jets, I think, would also be an interesting candidate there to trade up. And it's quarterback-needy teams, and it's 2 things. And we've kind of alluded to both of them. It's quarterback needy teams and then where they value Jackson Dart, who to me is the 3rd quarterback, or Shedeur Sanders. Like, when you talk to Jeremy, he's got him flipped. Shedor's his 3rd guy, right? So if that's the situation, then let's trade up and make that move if we have a high grade on that quarterback and we think he could be the guy.
Yeah, Tyler Shuck is another one who some people really, really like. And
he's awesome.
If a GM loves him and wants to take him, 29 feels like a pretty good place. Or Shedeur drops. Like that could be something where the Giants pass on him at 3. And if he's still available at 29, Adam Peters is getting on the phone and be like, hey man, you want to come up or are you going to wait to do this tomorrow? And they might go ahead and trade back into the first round. Just to clean up some of the details here, and then I'll get into the compensation. The Jets are pick 10 of the 2nd round, 42 overall. Saints are 2 before, 8, 40 overall. And the Giants are sitting at 34 overall, 2nd pick of the 2nd round. So the draft charts are interesting because they're all a little bit different. Jimmy Johnson's is the most famous one. I feel like the one that is most popular now, and every team has their own, by the way, and they make adjustments year over year, et cetera, et cetera. But the Fitzgerald-Spielberger chart, which is available for viewing on Over the Cap, is, I think, probably one of the more popular ones and has tended to be one of the more accurate ones when you go back and look at trades. And just to give you an idea of how quickly the value drops off in the draft. Pick number 1 is valued at 3,000 points, which now it feels like I'm playing Whose Line Is It Anyway? Everything's made up and the points don't matter. But on the Jimmy Johnson chart, also 3,000 points. But by the 7th pick, we're talking about 1,500 points. So the 7th pick, according to the Jimmy Johnson chart, is half as valuable as the 1st pick.
That's
the
crazy.
Fitzgerald-Spielberger chart is a little more forgiving. You have to get all the way down to 20th before you lose half the value. So 1508 is the 19th pick, 1482 is the 20th pick. So the 19th and a half pick, famously important in the draft, the 19th and a half pick. That is where you've now lost half the value of the number 1 pick.
That's crazy that they're so different.
So to go from 29 down to 34, 29 is 1,294 points. 34 is 1,213 points.
So they're almost the same.
Yeah. Like you're talking about, what is that? 70 points, 60 points, which the last pick in the draft is worth 190. So that would tell you you're only going to get 7th round pick, but we know that's not how that works, right? Teams are going to change that value based off what you're trading for. And I think people are going to look at that 5th-year option and be like, hey, no, we're not going to give you that for free. And especially if if you have obviously 2 teams on the phone and you'll be able to play them off of each other. It's a lot easier to be like, oh no, hey, sorry, they're willing to give up a 4th. You're going to give us a 3rd. You're going to do that. You can do this. Future draft picks also have less value. So is it a future 7th? Is it this year 7th? Whatever. But when trading for a quarterback, you talked about the grade being like times 1.2. Often teams will say, hey, oh, you're coming up for a quarterback? No, that's going to cost you 1.5 times the number of points or whatever their specific number is. But it's not a flat, hey, let's look at the chart and we just agree the chart is the chart. There is then negotiating room. The charts act as a basis for how this is going to go. And so to get, again, it's like basically nothing on the Spielberger chart, the Fitzgerald Spielberger chart, to go from 34 or even 40. We're talking about 160 points, which is, again, some kind of future seventh on this chart. And we just know that's not how that goes. On the Jimmy Johnson chart, for whatever it's worth, the 29th pick is worth 640 points. The 34th pick is worth 560. So it's like an 80-point difference, which on this chart is more of a fourth rounder. And that feels more right on what typically goes down for a move like that.
Sure. And again, like this is where I thought you saw some of this nuance in terms of draft value and charts last year with some of the trades that Adam Peters made and some of the trades he's made for players where it's like, hey, you're getting pick X and we're getting 2 picks, but we're also returning another pick to you. You know what I'm saying? So we're just, we're pick swapping 2 picks, you know what I'm saying? But we're just repositioning with the picks you're giving us to move up or move out or whatever we're doing. And I do think that there is some, that's smart work in terms of kind of accounting for some of that gray area in terms of value. So for me, like, I think it'd be awesome if they could get another 3rd round pick. Right. And so if they gave up their, what is it, like a 5th round pick, and then they did like a pick swap, you know, and got into the 3rd round. So they had a 2nd and 3rd round pick. I think that would be excellent because I think, like I said, I think the value here is in the 2nd and 3rd round. So that's where I think fans are like, oh, only a 7th round pick or only a 4th round pick. A 4th round pick would be great too, by the way, because then you could draft a running back and everything would be great. Right. So, but just having some more flexibility with those picks, I think, is ultimately what you're looking for, especially after giving them up rightfully so in those trades for Laramie Tunsil and Marshawn Lattimore. Yeah.
Another one that I'm looking at is the Rich Hill chart.
Gosh, I didn't realize there were so many charts here.
There's a ton of them, which a company called Draft Tech did. And they've got like 29th pick at 202 points, the 34th pick, the Giants pick at 175, which is what, a 27-point difference, which is equivalent to the 115th pick, which is a middle 4th rounder. So, like, again, the Spielberger chart is, you know, very, very different, but I think that one is based off like the research over time and how players played out. And so I think teams are trying to lean into that and trying to, you know, say like, hey, no, it's not worth that much. And you see some of these pick swaps, like you said, to make up for the fact that there isn't a 60-point value. But traditionally, you know, the Johnson chart, this chart tends to be a little more accurate, and it's going to bend towards these charts that value these picks a little bit more and have more separation, I guess is the better way to put it, between the picks. It's a less forgiving chart when you're talking about the quarterbacks. And so that's another thing to keep in mind is like, root for the quarterbacks to fall. Root for Jackson Dart to still be on the board late in the 1st round. Root for Shedeur Sanders to fall because that is going to help the Commanders recoup more value if they do wind up trading out of 29. Of course, there is the problem then that other players went instead of them, and so who's actually available to take? But, you know, one problem at a time. That's our show for today. We'll be back with Dane Brugler and the inside process of Logan's big board on Thursday. John Keim with us next week. And then if you stayed this far, I will tell you, there's a really good chance that America's new favorite guest is back with us next week, as well as Logan is on vacation. Not to mention one of the biggest names in NFL draft world working on locking that down. So maybe we'll have an announcement on Thursday on both of those things. But for now, thanks for listening. Make sure you're subscribed because if you made it this far, Lord knows you want more of this show in the future. So subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. And we'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.